It's been a year since Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency on food insecurity with the hope of addressing the increase in food prices caused by the removal of subsidies on petrol and floating of the naira by his administration. Part of his administration's strategic measures announced on Friday to improve food security is the suspension of duties, tariffs and taxes for the importation of certain food commodities through land and sea borders for a 150-day window. Now, according to Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture, Abubakar Kyari, the government hopes that the new food import policy will lead to a drastic reduction in the prices of basic food items. President of African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, disagrees. Rather, he submits that the government's decision risks destroying the country's agriculture. Speaking to African primates of the Anglican Church at a retreat in Abuja on Friday, Adesina said Nigeria cannot import its way out of food insecurity. Instead, he suggests that focus should be on producing more food to stabilize food prices while creating jobs and reducing foreign exchange spending. To discuss the nation's food security and strategies, as well as reactions to its viability, we invited an agribusiness expert, Dr. Adelaja Adesina. He is the managing consultant at Bdellium Consult Ltd. Doc, thanks for giving us your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's good to be here.
Did I get the name of your consult correctly?
Bdellium Consult, the B is silent.
Silent, yes. It was tricky for me. I wasn't so sure. Yeah. All right, let's start with your candid reaction to this announcement as a measure to help with food security.
Okay, thank you for that. My immediate reaction when I heard the news is that this is a knee-jerk reaction because, I mean, we know that the prices of foodstuff are generally going up in the market, and that was the response of the government. But I will expect that in taking such decision, you will look at short-term, long-term, and look up for solutions on that level. So what the government has done for those 150 days is to export jobs from Nigerian farmers, not just the farmers, the active players in Nigeria's agribusiness value chain. Because when we talk about agriculture, we're not just talking about the farmers alone. There are a number of activities from the input supply to the actual production on the farm to the logistic, transportation, and all of that. So when you, for 150 days, interfere with that process, those people will lose their job, and it will not solve the problem on the long run. That's why I called it a knee-jerk reaction to solving a very critical problem.
So you align with your namesake Adesina when he says it's destroying the agriculture sector, but isn't that maybe a bit of a stretch to say it's a destruction of the sector?
Okay, let's go about it this way. Anybody that is thinking long term and solving the problem, we know that that is not the way to go. And so I'm not surprised that Dr. Akinwumi Adesina took that stand and made the submissions that he made on the government's position. But if you look at 150 days, most of the crops that we're looking at to bring into the country, we're looking at rice, we're looking at maize. The lifespan, the time of planting from maize to harvest is about 120 days. So can government put something in place so that within the 120 days we can grow our maize and harvest it? That is even well before the 150 days that we're talking about. If you look at rice, we have some rice variety that in 100 days they're ready. So what the government should have done is to put structures in place that will empower the farmers to quickly produce those food items. And within that 150 days, we will have our farmers on the farm doing their bit. We have all the actors in the value chain being active.
What is our capacity to actually fulfill such a responsibility, feeding the nation within this window, if we are to go that route?
As we speak, agriculture creates jobs for about 56 to 60% of our population as we speak. So the workforce is there, the land is there. So what I will expect is that we look at what is missing. Why can't this workforce that is there and utilize the land that we have to be able to produce this food? And that's where the solution should have come from, to make sure that our people are able to produce. And I can go back and tell you why. The issue of insecurity, a number of people have stayed away from the farms. If you go to the northeast, northwest, north central, even the southeast, we're still waiting for the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics to give us the data on the number of people that have stayed away from the farm. So that is number one thing that needs to be tackled. It's not as if we don't have the capacity, but when people are afraid,
but that is the reality, and some would say that is the reason why the government is choosing to go this way. Because if you cannot, for instance, it is their responsibility. Yes, they are failing in that regard in providing security. But in the short term, how do you address food security? If you were to be in a position, we'll talk about the consequences, of course, but if you were to be in a position to advise the government at this time, would you suggest a different route? For instance, within this window that we're talking about, 150 days.
So are we saying that within 150 days, that's how many months? 5 months, we cannot tackle the insecurity problem? We can do it within 30 days if we so decide.
So I would say you're speaking like you're not a Nigerian. We've had insecurity problem for eons, if I were to be bold.
So you will now ask, with our spend on defense, on security, all the state governors have security votes. What are they doing with it? So those are the things that they should deploy right now as we speak to solve the problem of insecurity, and that can be achieved within 10 days if the government put its foot down. And once the people are assured that they can go to the farm without fear, they will go, because the Nigerians are not lazy, especially those in the
I would want to explore the conversation around insecurity, because, like it or not, it is key to our food security. Yes. They're all connected one way or the other. But we'll come back to that, so we don't overflog the issue of security. Let's talk about, break it down for us, the consequences of flooding the markets with cheap imports on domestic production.
How cheap are these imports going to be? That's the question that you will ask. Because if you start importing food, anything, already there's pressure on our foreign exchange. So if you now add the food pressure to it, so if care is not taken, there's a possibility that the price of the naira will depreciate further, and the so-called cheap import that we're expecting will no longer be cheap, because it's still going to be backed by the value of the dollar. So that cannot be a solution, because it will put additional pressure on our naira, and the naira will depreciate further, and the food will not be cheap any longer.
Okay, let me go off script and wonder aloud. If experts like yourself and Dr. Adesina and others aware of the consequences of this action are available for advice, what worries you the most about the quality of advice that the government is getting as regards trying to improve on the nation's food security?
You see, there has to be a sincerity of purpose. We are all in agreement that there is a problem, and there are so many ways to solve this problem of food insecurity. So if I am in a position to speak to them, which I try, as much as possible, is that let us look at short-term, medium-term, and long-term. Our problem of food insecurity did not start today.
True.
So it is not something that you resolve in 150 days, because you have to plan to solve the problem. And if you're thinking of what will happen let me bring another slant to it. It will mean that we are dependent on the supply chain, the global supply chain for our food. So if anything happens to that supply chain, what are we going to do? Are we going to take another knee-jerk position and try to solve the problem. So that's why we cannot run away from creatively thinking of ways to resolve the problem. I've just mentioned insecurity as one. Why are the farmers not producing optimally? You talk about access to finance. That's another big problem, because as we speak, the interest rate in Nigeria today, I speak authoritatively, and I hope somebody will have an opinion that will be contrary to that and will back it up with facts. The interest rate in Nigeria today cannot support any profitable agricultural venture. So that is another way government must go.
Could it be that that is what is impacting this decision to go this route? Because people are afraid to invest in an economy and in a sector that the likelihood of recouping your investment is very slim. But we know that to the credit of the government, they are saying that, let me see, the minister did say that he understands the concern and they will try to integrate these rural farmers. What your level of confidence on that assurance?
Okay, I just mentioned something now about the interest rates. The assurance is not there. If you invest in agriculture, the margin that you are going to make profit, it's between 17 and 21%. That is, you have done very well if you make up to that. Now, if you're taking loan at 24, 28%, that means, number one, you cannot pay back that loan, except you take money from another business to do that. So if, let me tell you something, if government decides that within the next 150 days, I'm using the 150 as a reference now, that interest rate on agri lending is 8%. And that anybody that takes agri loan goes through the process and know that within the next 150 days, you will pay 8%, 5%, even let's stretch it to 10%. You will see the massive impact that that will have within the next 200 days on our food supply, because a lot of people will take the money and use it for business, and they know that they can repay back at that interest rate. So those are the kind of things that government should be looking at to solve the problem. And someone that has taken the loan at 8-10% has repaid, has built a credit record that can qualify that person for more support from government. So those are the short-term and long-term solutions that can be looked into, and we can resolve this problem.
Okay, let's private sector engagement in this decision that we have now. Do you think there was wild consultation enough for this decision? And I do know the president of the bank, Dr. Adesina, did say that there are available finances for the agriculture sector here in Nigeria. Are we utilizing these resources?
You've asked two questions in one. Are there wide consultation? And I'll say no. If you talk to all the community associations, whether it is maize, whether it is rice, whether it is poultry, whether it is cattle, if you talk to all the members, they will say that this is taking them by surprise. So that is, they were not consulted. Because I'm sure if they were widely consulted, they will have given reasons why government should not go that route. So there was no, in my mind, in my opinion, no wide consultation. Now, the second question you asked was the engagement itself, that people are going, it's business. We're talking agribusiness. Agriculture is not a development program.
Okay, let me just be clear what Adesina said. He said the bank has provided about $520 million to support the establishment of special agricultural processing zones. And he says this will allow private agri-businesses to establish industries that process and add value to agriculture commodities. He also went ahead to talk about another $134 million to Nigeria for emergency food production. If we have these, why do we need these open borders?
So everything Dr. Adesina has said is buttressing one fact, that the government did not have solid consultation in arriving at this decision. And that is why a lot of people it's not good for our country. It's not good, it is not safe. We're talking about control right now. If you open our borders, you know how porous our borders is. Who will ensure the safety of those food items that come into Nigeria? We're putting our population at risk by opening our borders like that. You will stretch all the agencies of government to be able to be effective, and you cannot guarantee their effectiveness. So it's, I don't know, it's not something that...
You talked earlier about the impact, the value chain, depending on the global value chain. I want you to speak a little more on that, how this policy will impact the developmental value chain and agricultural infrastructure in Nigeria.
Okay, in Nigeria, you are keeping the actors across the value chain out of business for that period of time, and the thing will extend. That means the multiplier effect of taking, I'm not even talking about the farmers, the processors, the transporters, the market women, all of these people will be out of business for that period. Then on the global scene, look at what happened in the Ukraine-Russian war, how it affected the price of bread, because wheat that we use come from that region. So if anything happens to rice or to maize, that's how the price will skyrocket again. So it's a global network. So let us solve our problem internally. The things that are keeping our farmers away from producing, the things that are preventing the value chain actor from acting value so that we can have this food in abundance, those are the things that I think we should address. And it can be addressed short term, medium term, and long term.
Okay, let's start with that. So that's suggestion for moving forward, because that's actually at the heart of these conversations we have on one slot. Short, long, medium, and long term. Could you give us an example of how it could go?
Okay, I just mentioned that the turnaround time for most of these crops, maize, rice, beans. By the way, beans is more expensive than rice in the market now. So beans, let's start with that. It has a 60 to 90 days cultivation period. Okay. So if we empower the sector, the farmers that are growing beans, and say, okay, we're giving you the input, we're giving you seed that will give you good yield, we're bringing machinery to clear the field, so that within 2-3 days, what a bulldozer or a plow or a tractor will do the job of for 30 days. So a tractor will clear acreage of land, and people are there to farm. When you grow, I'm still using beans as a case study now, that in 60 days there are varieties of beans that you can grow. You have your extension workers. We have them in the different ministries to continue to educate the farmers on best agronomic practices. Those are short term. You don't need 100 days to teach somebody on the field to grow beans. The same thing, replicate that with maize. Replicate that with tomato. Somebody made a joke. He said, pepper is now showing us pepper.
That's not a lie. It's actually true.
So, but if you ask pepper, how many days does it take to grow pepper in the open field or in the greenhouse? So why can't we empower people that are growing pepper to grow more pepper, and let there be market for them, that they know that when they grow, they will have the market. So those are short-term solutions. Now, medium-term is that we need to do this issue of access to finance. Within 6 months, we must have a policy. I know there is a government policy that talked about interest rate to agriculture, but that is on paper. If you ask 80% of people that are on the field, the smallholder farmers that form the bulk of our food growers, supply, they don't have access to the funding that government is providing. So let us clear out the bottlenecks that prevent the smallholder farmer, the small-scale farmer, somebody that has 1-2 acre, not even hectare, 1 acre of farm to be able to access finance for inputs and to be able to sell. That is medium term. Then if you're talking about long term, it's in the area of our R&D, research and development. Agriculture is science. That's why it is called agri science. So we must be able to empower our people to use the science to do their agriculture. So, and that is, we capacitate our research institution. Their research findings will not just end up in a publishing paper and in gathering dust somewhere. It must be taken to the field. Because as we speak, you cannot download food. You have to produce it.
Okay, we seem to be able to download every other thing, but definitely not food.
You cannot download food. You cannot have digital maize or rice. It has to be physically grown. So let research connect with the farmer. Let's empower the research.
I don't want to forget quickly. Please also do not lose your train of thought. I'll come back to you on the long term because you stopped at the middle term. There's concern about the quality, the genetic modification of the imports that we're thinking of bringing in. Like it or not, the decision has been made unless the government chooses to listen to policy experts. What advice would you give to ensure that the quality of grains that are coming into this country are of standard and not genetically modified?
Okay, I will answer that question by asking a question, and I'm throwing that open to the people in authority and everybody that is listening. The one that has been approved is the maize, the teller maize that has been approved. So the question is teller maize being grown outside of Africa? Is it being grown in Europe? The answer is no. Is it being grown in the US? The answer is no. Is it being grown in China? The answer is no. Is it being grown in India? The answer is no. Capital no. Anybody that has any contrary opinion can come on air and tell us where this maize, teller maize, is being grown. It's only in Nigeria, South Africa, and some other African countries. So for me, we have local varieties of maize that we can grow and use to solve our problem. So you raised the question about how do we ascertain that other crops that are genetically modified are not being imported. We don't have the mechanism to do it, so we're putting ourselves at risk. And for anything genetic, the effect may not even be in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The impact may be 20, 30 years down the line before you can start feeling it. And that's why I'm not surprised that NAFDAC DG came up openly to oppose to genetically modified. She knows what she's talking because she's a scientist. All
right, I'm being told we have very limited time left for this conversation, so I'll just let you conclude your thoughts on the long-term measures that we can take.
Okay, another long-term measure that I know that we can take is when we build capacity of our local farmers is long-term. I've talked about access to finance. Yeah, shouldn't forget the infrastructure. The roads are bad. I know they're not going to fix the road in one day. So we can plan that in the areas where we have, we fix our roads so that the food can come out without, to minimize post-harvest losses. So we need to fix our infrastructure on the long-term power supply and all of those so that we can store. Tomato can't keep for too long, but if you have refrigeration infrastructure to store them in cold storage, you can keep them for longer period. So we need to improve infrastructure on the long term, power supply, road, and all of this. There's so many, all of these things are well documented that we can go on.
I mean, half the time when we have conversations like this, at the heart of almost all our problem is leadership. 95%, if I'm bold to say, is leadership, because if we can get that right, every other thing will fall into place. You've made very valuable submissions today, and I'm told we're out of time, but I'd like you to speak as quickly as you can in 30 seconds. How commendable is this initiative by the president, the wife of the president, Tinubu, asking people to grow their little gardens at home? Yeah,
that is very commendable, commendable, and let us back it up with action. It's not just about talking about it. Let's make sure that we empower people to be able to grow their food within the confines of their home.
I don't have any space to grow, so I'm
There's
exempt.
vertical farming. You can grow, even in this studio, you can grow some food.
Okay, we'll think of something. Thank you so much for speaking with us, Doctor. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.